Hello, welcome back. We are on part 4 of my solo Brutal V Rising playthrough. You can go back and watch the previous parts if you'd like to catch up, but a very quick recap. I've got a couple of settings adjusted on this run, mainly to prevent too much grinding. So loot is slightly higher, there's no durability loss, crafting is a little faster, nothing crazy. And then I also started this run at the default difficulty for V-Bloods, which is a 70% multiplier for damage, and then a little bit more health and a few more gear levels. But as I talked about in the previous video, in Act 1 and near the end, I found that this was just a little bit too hard for me. And I believe in playing games the way that you are happy playing them. So after quite a bit of struggle, and also learning how to actually adjust server settings on a server that's already been created, or a world that's already been created, I managed to turn it down to a plus 25% damage multiplier and plus 1 gear level. So the brutal moveset is still active, but the bosses just do a little bit less damage. At this point in the run, we have just defeated Quincy the Bandit King, and we are ready to properly move on to Act 2 with iron available to us now. By the way, I'm Savant. I make videos about games, development, and creativity. I do also stream on Twitch if you'd like to catch me playing games live, but this V Rising run was entirely off stream, just a fun time for myself in the evenings, which kind of makes it a YouTube exclusive. After beating Quincy, I can now smelt iron, so I went up to Dunley Farms, this whole big area in the middle of the map, which is still kind of dangerous for me at this point. If I run into any of the brutes or a wandering boss, I could be in trouble. There's a big iron mine here that is frequented by 2 different bosses that are much too strong for me right now, but that's where I'm headed. As I was approaching, I saw Meredith, one of the bosses, walking in, and I kept my distance. Meredith routinely goes in and fights another boss, Krieg, the undead general. Don't worry about them too much right now, we're gonna meet them properly later. But if you are getting iron and you happen to catch one of them in here dead, or if you catch them fighting and one of them kills the other one, you can scoop that up as a free boss if you're sneaky and if you seize the opportunity. And I would really recommend keeping your eye out down here, specifically for Krieg, because he sucks. You'll see when we get there. I was a little more cautious than I probably needed to be, because honestly, dying in this game without the durability loss is just an inconvenience. But it is still pretty annoying to do the run back, especially into the iron mine, so I just snuck in, grabbed a few iron nodes, and then left. At home, I built a second smelter to get through the iron faster, making use of my own advice. I also made a few garlic resist potions, which I think we unlocked defeating Pelora. Once you get into Act 2 gear, you'll start to need a lot of cotton as well as some sunflowers for different things, and all of the farms are surrounded by garlic up here. I always maintain that I'm a vampire who loves garlic because I love garlic in real life, but alas, the game does not care about my RP choices, and so I still get a rapidly stacking debuff if I go near the farms that are protected by garlic. The resist potion that we have now reduces the stacks, but it doesn't eliminate them completely. You get a slightly stronger one later in the game. But with my little resistance potion, I went out to pillage some cotton farms, hoping for seeds. The way I understand how seeds work in this game is that every plant you harvest has a small chance of giving you seeds, but it does seem to be a pretty small chance. I've personally had a lot more luck finding seeds in like storage chests and things, but I did not get super lucky on this run, either from harvesting or from checking crates. And if you ever aren't sure where to find a certain resource, you can always use the map. If you hover over the little areas on the map, it will tell you what major resources you can find there. Obviously, this doesn't cover everything that could possibly drop, but it will give you an idea as to like where the farms are, where you can find a lot more paper, where you can find more leather, and things like that. Also, as I go, I'm always keeping an eye out for any 90+% units that I might want to convince to be my friend. At this point, we still don't have dust collars or prison cells, so it's a big project to escort them back home, and we cannot harvest their blood. We can only make them a servant right now, but high quality servants become very useful once you build your throne and start to send them out on missions, which we're going to be able to do very soon. After my cotton run, I went home to start working with the iron. I built my smithy, which allows me to craft iron weapons. And iron weapons are great because it unlocks the second weapon ability, so you can really start to use the full skill set, especially as you get more of the spells unlocked by defeating bosses. I made axes first because I do really enjoy using axes as a weapon, and I think the secondary skill, which is has a little bit of a range, is super useful for a lot of the boss fights. Ultimately, I want to get my harvesting tools up to iron as soon as I can, and then also make a ranged weapon, since at this point I am finally starting to strategize with these bosses and realizing how useful ranged weapons are. A little more iron finished smelting and I was able to make an iron hammer as well. I realize they call it a mace, but it feels like a hammer to me, so sorry if that bothers you. After getting some new weapons, I know that I need to defeat Beatrice the Tailor to unlock the loom, and then I can start actually processing this cotton. And this is where I encountered my first big surprise in Brutal, so if you don't want spoilers for Brutal mode, turn back now. Honestly, it's probably a little late, we are fully in Act 2, but you have been warned. So Beatrice lives in this kind of big human town with a lot of guards in it. And in normal mode, she's this helpless old lady that runs away from you until you eventually kill her, and she'll summon the guards to her when she's near them. And she's really annoying on normal mode, but fairly easy. And like a fool, I was expecting the same kind of fight. I had not remembered at all that the brutal bosses have additional moves and stuff. So I cleared out the town of innocent bystanders and went in for what I expected to be a pretty easy but grindy boss fight. And then, I'm not even joking, my first thought was that she was bugged. And I don't even know what sort of bug this would even be. Because as I said, I was not thinking about brutal mode. Because up until this point, there wasn't really a noticeable difference from the for the bosses. That the moves that they had were like a little bit different, I think. But I couldn't remember the normal mode enough to really remember like which moves are new and which behaviors are new. But what happens here is when you get Beatrice to 50%, she stops and turns into a gargoyle. And then just to confuse me even further, she actually did get bugged, and this is a recurring problem for this fight, where she just keeps resetting. And so she ran back to her guards, turned back into an old lady, and reset her health. So I was super confused. And then it happened again, 50% health, turns into a gargoyle. And that's when I started to put the pieces together, like, oh, of course, this is brutal. This is what the brutal mode does. But once you get her into the gargoyle mode, as long as she doesn't bug out and reset, you can fight her like that. And you have to get her down. If you fought gargoyles in late game V Rising on like normal mode or on a previous run, I'm pretty sure her moveset is the same moveset that they have. She does a big melee attack, like a swipe, some lunge attacks, and then a couple of jumps. There's like a little jump and then a big jump where they fly up into the sky for a couple of seconds and then they drop down with this huge AoE. And it hits really hard, as you might expect, so it's important to get out of that one especially. I actually almost got Beatrice on the first attempt, but the gargoyle got me in the end. I was having a lot of trouble with the chasing part of the fight on later attempts because she kept going outside of the bounds of the town or like right up to the edge. And then when she turned into a gargoyle, she would just like reset. I don't know, something about the aggro was really messed up for this fight. But one funny thing is that if you get her into gargoyle mode and there are civilians in town, they will totally attack her. These townspeople don't even know that their little old lady is secretly a gargoyle. In a later attempt, I had another moment where I just got a little bit greedy. I saw that her health was getting low, I got in there for some hammer hits, but it wasn't enough and she killed me. And then it was daylight. This is another fight that's really not possible to do in daylight. There's just not enough shade. So I spent some time picking off the guards that had respawned and waited for nightfall again. It did seem like the entire town had respawned, so I made sure to clear it and heal up before starting the fight. I also realized much later after the fights that Beatrice is actually level 43 here. She should be level 41 at the new settings. I didn't even think about that because I didn't remember coming up here before I lowered the multiplier. I see now that I did. So during all these attempts, she is actually at the default plus 70 damage, and I didn't even realize it. Beatrice ended up taking many attempts because she just kept resetting, and it was very annoying. I'm not really sure what to recommend as far as strategies. The thing I was trying to do that seemed to work sometimes is just try to get her kind of stuck in a house or something so she can't run very far. Because I think that the aggro range is based on where you start fighting, though that I could be totally wrong about that. Watching back, I can also criticize my own fighting style. I can see I'm still not using my shield effectively, which could have helped a lot here. The way that you want to use the shield moves in V-Rising, now that I've played a lot more of it, is you want to try to use your shield right when there is an attack that you could block, because that's how you get the most benefits out of your shield. If you use it too early or too late, it just doesn't really do anything. But I wasn't totally keyed into that at the time. So I either should have been using some offensive moves since my shield wasn't doing anything, or I should have timed it differently. But you live and you learn. As I attempted again and again, because of the aggro issues, another day passed. I found a nice juicy 87% rogue to snack on, and eventually I had a decent attempt where I didn't cause her to reset and I managed to get out of the way of the big gargoyle hits. Then near the end of the fight, I actually got really lucky and a brute just walked through town, killed her for me, right there at the end. So there she was, Beatrice the Tailor, slain by her own guards. Since I actually did this fight on the default difficulty by accident as well, I'm a little surprised I didn't rage because all the aggro resets that kept happening and it was like kind of hard. But honestly, I think this fight was a lot of fun. When it works, it's a lot of fun. It's a nice little surprise. Spice things up severally from normal mode. I just would really love it if they could sort out the aggro radius. I could definitely see if I was in like a worse mood that day, getting super mad that the boss fight kept resetting. On my way home, I saw a 99% rogue outside town, quickly changed into dominate form and snatched him up. I wasn't really confident that I could get him all the way home because it was kind of a long way. And I feel like Dunley Farms has a lot of these patrols with like one really high level guy in the middle. But I just kept running, moving off the road whenever I saw someone scary. I took a few chances to fight some of the lower level patrols, and eventually we made it. I also noticed I had acquired a servant at some point before I defeated Quincy that I didn't talk about. I completely missed it. I have no idea where I found this guy or when. So sorry about that. It's a lot of footage to go through, and I guess I've just missed some things. Either way, once I got home, I did murder Newbie, who was the 24% that we got just to advance the quest, and I replaced him with my new 99% servant from Dunley Farms. So now I have my new servant, which I eventually named Grendon because I was watching Drawtectives when I was playing this. And then Carthel is the other servant that I found, which is just a randomly generated name. Now we can build a loom, which is the crafting station in V Rising that I hate the most because it doesn't make any sense. First of all, you don't use a loom to make thread, you use like a spinning wheel or some kind of spindle. Second of all, how in God's name are we making thread out of some grass and some flower pollen? Also doesn't make sense. Third, what is up with wool thread? There's no wool in the game, but there are farms, and you make the wool thread out of cloth and coarse thread, which is made out of grass and flower pollen. It's just nonsense. The loom in V Rising makes me angry whenever I think about it because I do fiber crafts in real life, and it doesn't have to be this crazy. Stunlock, do you not know how clothes are made? Anyway, moving on. The next thing I actually did was take some time to relocate my castle into Dunley Farms and do like a more final build. I am going to skip through almost all of this because we have a lot of V Rising to get through, and I'm not really that serious about base building. I'm not going to have any pro tips that you couldn't get somewhere else. I'm just building very intuitively, seeing where the plot takes me. But I will talk a little bit about how the castle relocation works because I had never done it before. Basically, there is something you can build. I think it's called like the relocation heart or something like that. And once you build it, you can interact to select which of your castles you want to relocate. And then everything from that castle gets put into your build menu, and you have to place it all down before you can finalize the relocation. So before you do this, I would really recommend going to your old castle and just like destroying some stuff, consolidating it a little bit, because otherwise you have to basically clear out your whole new plot just so you can put everything down. Then you gotta rearrange it, because like you can't just like pick up the whole castle and drop it somewhere else. It's not gonna fit, most likely. Most castles will not just fit like that because the plots are kind of varied and interesting. And you can't, as far as I know, do any new building until the relocation is done. So it's a very specific process, and if you have a lot of stuff built, it can be really annoying. But it took me, I don't know, an evening to do the relocation and then do the build. For my castle build itself, I ended up doing this kind of half upstairs, half downstairs thing with a little indoor balcony. I think these are really cute. I also made sure to put down large rooms for the forge most of all, and also the tailoring room, because both of these have some pretty big crafting stations. After my little castle build, I did a bit of exploring. I dipped into Gloomrot briefly, just mostly to unlock the waypoint, because I know after we get through some of Act 2, we're going to be heading up to Gloomrot. I also tested out some of the ice moves, because I think some of these are recommended for one of the next bosses that I want to attempt. And I also finally built a throne. I believe you need the reinforced planks for that, so now that we have iron, we can make those. And now I can send my servants out on missions to collect things for me. There are certain parts of the game that I've noticed where this is really useful, and then there's also a point where it's not really as useful, where you just have a lot of stuff and you don't really need more stuff. You do have to gear up your servants if you want them to actually get anything. So I made some nice gear for my boys so I could send them out prepared, and I sent both of them together to get some iron from the iron mine. And the way that this works is that your servants have like this level of expertise that's based on their percentage when you get them, and then the gear adds to the level, so they get kind of this base level of competency, and then the gear increases it. And you can, I think, pretty much gear up any servant so that they can do most of the hunts. And then there's also this percentage chance of success, so you can have a servant with very little gear that gets lucky with like a 50%, but I would recommend trying to get them geared up to where you're at, because that's going to give you the most useful hunts and the most success. I don't remember why, but I had a lot of AFK time in this part of my recordings. I'm not really sure what I was doing, but if you see the time skip ahead a lot, don't worry, you aren't missing anything. I just probably had to go do something and left the game open. The next boss I went looking for is Vincent the Frostbringer. He is a wanderer, one of the wandering bosses, and I was not really sure where he wandered at, so I made some guesses, pulled up the blood tracking. And once I found him, I wasn't quite sure where the best place to engage him would be. And that's been my struggle with a lot of these wandering bosses, is that there's not really a perfect place to fight them. A lot of the roads are pretty narrow, there's not a lot of like rock to hide behind and things like that. So I usually would just fight them wherever they happen to be when I showed up. I do prefer an arena where I have a little bit more control over what's around me, but you can't have everything, I suppose. My first attempt at Vincent was over quickly, and the biggest problem is that I was not using a good shield. As I mentioned, I wasn't really using shields effectively, and he does these big ice bullets, and if you use your shields the right way, you can deal with them pretty easily. So I was kind of trying to use the trees to block them, and I also wasn't really seeing the cues in time, and so I was getting hit by almost every one. When you have the frost attacks, it also will like freeze you in place if you get hit too many times, and so that was a problem as well. I did several attempts on Vincent that I'm going to cut for the sake of brevity. I want to say maybe 5 attempts that failed for a couple reasons. One, I'm not handling his ice bullets and I'm getting frozen. 2, I'm running into patrols by accident. And 3, I am standing too close when he does the Frost Nova. During one attempt, Vincent made it into town where we ran into an old friend, Meredith. I thought this would be good for me, but unfortunately I think they are on the same team. I don't really know a lot of the lore of V Rising as much as I've played it. But these guys do seem to be friends, so they did not fight each other. I also saw a few of the cloaked humans walk by and checked to see if they were Bane in disguise, because I thought maybe he would help me out, but everyone that I attacked to try and pull into the fight was not Bane. After that, I tried a new strategy, the Unholy Shield. I forget if I don't think that's the actual name of the spell, but it's the green, like necro shield that spawns skeletons. And this quickly becomes a favorite of mine. I like it a lot. The skeletons are not very strong, but they act as little shields for a lot of these bullet-based attacks. And then they also draw the boss's attention away for just a second, so I can get clear of some of the moves easier. And after switching to the Unholy Shield, I almost got him. Just a sliver of health, it was very close. My next attempt, I ran in, did some damage, and then, would you look at that? The one time I'm not actually trying to find Bane, he's here. Vincent aggroed him himself. And boy, Bane hates Vincent. He hates him so much. I backed up and let them fight it out, and Vincent went down super fast. Did I really earn this kill? Maybe not, but I'm taking it anyway. Vincent gives us prison cells, which is one of the most important things for setting up your run for long-term success, because it means you can get a renewable source of high-quality blood instead of just hoping that you get lucky when you're wandering around, which is what we've been doing until this point. After Vincent, I ran home to drop off some loot, and then I went looking for Tristan the vampire hunter, because he gives us the blood essence, that we can craft the blood essence instead of having to find those special hearts. Tristan is another wanderer. A lot of the bosses around this point in the game are wanderers who just go, they have their loops that they go across. So it's kind of tough to know where to engage them. Tristan, being a vampire hunter, does a lot of melee and gun-based moves, some acrobatic jumps and swipes. He also has a fire arrow that will set a lot of things on fire, so you want to make sure you have both mobility and the space to get out of the fire and out of the way. And then later in the fight, after 50% I believe, he also does some larger explosions and this awful whirlwind attack that is really hard for me to understand, but we'll get there. I do feel like I did pretty good on my first attempt. I was still trying to learn his moves and wasn't really expecting a first try win, but I still got him to about 50%. And then, foolishly, I tried to get Belmont to fight him. Obviously, they are both vampire hunters, they're not gonna be enemies, so I just had to run away from both of them, wait for them to stop walking down the same goddamn road. I made several more attempts at Tristan, getting a little better, but not making a ton of progress. And then after maybe 6 tries total, I realized that Tristan was at the higher default level. So I admin killed him and left to wait for him to respawn. I mentioned in my last video that once you change the settings on the server, bosses that have already spawned into the world will not have the new settings until they die and are respawned. So because I obviously can't kill them myself, because that's the whole point behind changing the settings, I just use the admin command. It doesn't give me any V-blood or any bonuses. I just wait for them to respawn. And while I was waiting for Tristan to respawn, I went to find Christina the Sun Priestess. She was already at the level she was supposed to be, so no respawning necessary. I engaged her during the day, and I don't know why I thought this would be a good idea. She's literally called the Sun Priestess. This is her element. I did okay on the first attempt, but I did go down, and I wasn't really serious about fighting Christina at this point. I was just sort of killing time and getting familiar with some of her moves. So after that one attempt, I didn't really do any more attempts. I just grabbed my loot, made some more potions. I know the buffs from these don't seem very big, but I feel like they help a lot. So I make sure I'm stocked up on the little buff potions. And then I went back to Tristan, who is now level 45, as he should be on my current settings, and this went a lot better. I've also learned the timing of some of his moves a little bit better after all of the other attempts, so I'm managing to block them more often. And I found that blocking the fire arrow is the most useful because it stops the puddle of flames. It blocks it completely. So that's really good to look for if you can block the fire arrow specifically with the shield. But he does have other moves like the explosion that also make fire, so it's not a perfect solution, but it does help a lot. Using the trees and the rocks around to block attacks is also a good idea. I'm not the best at this, but I am trying, I am learning. And as I am backing up, trying to avoid some of Tristan's moves, I have another lucky break. Alpha the White Wolf walked up to help me out. And the bonus is that even though the wolf is obviously much weaker than Tristan, he went down pretty quickly, he has his own health orbs that I could pick up. So once Tristan killed the wolf, I was able to heal a little bit, and that was enough to get Tristan down just barely. This is another boss fight where at the end of it I had like one singular health point left, but I got him, and I stole some free healing from the downed wolf as well. I made and tried out a great sword now that I can make one, but I did not really like it. I've seen people use the different swords really effectively in this game, but it's another weapon that just doesn't feel like it fits my playstyle, so I don't really end up using it at all. Next, instead of going after Christina, who I think is in the little row with Tristan and Vincent, I really wanted to get the next level of research started, so I skipped around on the list a little bit and went after Maja, or possibly Maja. It was this boss where I was really disappointed I didn't capture game audio on this run because she's so funny. She starts talking about paper cuts and homework, and it's just so silly to me that this like dark witch is saying these things to a vampire. It just seems kind of wild. Luckily, she's not a wanderer. She's just in her big library tower, and there's no ads or anything when you run back. It's fantastic. A lot of her moves are based on dodging projectiles. She's not really that much of a heavy hitter. She's just got a lot going on. So for this fight, a shield is good, but you really just want to keep moving. Try and get a feel for the ways that these books travel across the screen so you can dodge them. Try to find safe zones to stand in. And then there are also some bookshelves that can absorb a hit or two, but these go down pretty quickly, and so you can only use them a couple times to block some hits. She also has a phase where she summons these little like book goblins. I don't know what these are. They will attack you, but then at some point she will do this little spell and call them over to her, and if they reach her, she will eat them up and heal. So that's one of the big mechanics to watch out for, because obviously you don't want the bosses to be healing. It drags out the fight, it makes it much harder. She killed me on the first try, no problem. I'm not really a first try brutal kind of person, I'm finding out. The second try is a little harder because I don't have those bookshelves to eat any of the attacks. I tried a longbow for this fight, primarily because while it is slow, it can hit single targets for a lot of damage, so I'm hoping to have an easier time with the ads, specifically the ads that she's trying to eat. I did do several tries that I'm going to kind of montage here, but I do really like the combination of the longbow and then the two chaos moves, Chaos Volley and Aftershock. My main problem was with focusing on what was most important at the time in the battle. I kept accidentally letting her eat the ads because I was distracted by all the other ads and by dodging the books, so she was able to heal up during a couple of the attempts, and that was what killed me ultimately. I think the winning strategy here is to burn the ads down as fast as possible. Just whenever they're up, burn them down. And then if you see her doing the little summoning thing, like she's gonna eat an ad, try to kill that ad at all costs. Burn your spells on it if you have to, because it's worth it to avoid her getting that heal. And the one problem that I can't really do much about is that the ads will sort of walk in front of the one I'm trying to hit, which is just why it's helpful to get as many ads killed as you can, because they'll block the line of sight to the one she's trying to eat sometimes. Eventually, I did enough of the right moves for long enough to get her down, to feed the librarian and unlock the research. I like a fight like this that is more about understanding placement and understanding the flow of the battle, It feels like winning in this situation is much more in my control. It's not as chaotic as some other fights. And then I think the deciding factor, the thing that helped me the most with this fight was using my ultimate, remembering to use my ultimate first of all, and using my ultimate when the ad phase started so that I just didn't have as many of them to deal with. And with Maja or Maja down, I can now build the Athenium, which is the second level of the research desk. I have a few books, but I'm going to have to start producing a lot of paper and a lot of coarse thread as quickly as I can to try and get the new gear and the weapons unlocked. And with that, I think we're going to stop here. Let's see, what did we do in this video? I moved my castle to a better location. I got 4 bosses down in Act 2. Started the next set of research. I'm now centered in Dunley Farm, so it's easier to get to a lot of the mid and end game stuff, resources and bosses. So I'd say things are going pretty well. If you thought this was fun, if you'd like to see more of this solo Brutal V Rising run, don't forget to subscribe because I've got a lot more. A lot more coming down the pipe. This was a lot of footage, there's so many bosses in V Rising and a lot of things to do, which I didn't realize because I've kind of just been blitzing through every time I play. It feels very fast, but there's a lot of content there. So I'll be back soon with another video, and I hope to see you there. Bye bye!